Hello. Just working out the light thing here. See if I can get it more reasonable. Let's see. It's 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. Welcome. I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn. And this month, January, I'm talking about deep recovery. And we think that deep recovery is really all about substance abuse. But deep recovery is really about recovering and reclaiming who we are in our essential nature. And whether we have a substance abuse problem or a problem like with alcohol, with gaming or debting or social media or whatever that is, it's the beginning place potentially for discovering ourselves, recovering ourselves. And I really mean that in a sense that we're recovering ourselves from substances or patterns and habits that potentially are unconscious at first, but then we become conscious and we go, I don't want to do that anymore. And then how do we start not doing that anymore? And what gives us the impetus, the impetus, or the word's not coming right now, the impetus to follow through with that. And that's what I'm talking about today. So a little bit of history. I graduated many years ago with a master's in marriage and family therapy, marriage and family and child therapy, and worked in Nova Scotia for the Commission on Drug Dependency. That was the name of the program then. I don't know what the program's name is now, but I worked in Nova Scotia for 8 years for the Commission on Drug Dependency as a clinical therapist. And in that process, I think in learning to be a therapist, because I was just at the beginning stages of my career, my clients, the people who were in recovery, to whatever degree, they were my best teachers. They taught me so much about that dynamic of in the habits and patterns and the process which one goes through over and over and again in terms of recovering themselves. And all of us, no matter what, are in this process of recovering ourselves. Hi, Joni. So in that process of recovering ourselves, we're exploring and being present to ourselves in ways that we've never been. So working with people who were in recovery of substance abuse primarily, that was alcohol, drugs, and food, and their families who were in the process of disengaging themselves from codependent patterns and habits. I learned a lot, and I learned the importance of spirituality in cultivating that capacity to recover ourselves. And it took me on a long journey to the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology out in California, where I got my PhD in transpersonal psychology, and I focused on spiritual guidance. And in all of that process, and then and then trained myself to be a transformational coach. Through that process, I've realized the degree to which we are all in recovery. We're all in the process of cultivating awareness of who we are within our patterns and our habits. There's so much of us that is unconscious. I think I heard a statistic that basically only 4 or 5% of us, each an individual, we're conscious of what we know about ourselves. The rest is outside that consciousness. We can call it the collective unconscious. We can call it the subconscious. We can call it the psyche. We can call it the multidimensional parallel self. We can call it whatever we want. But the fact of the matter is there's just so much that we're aware of, and we can grow that capacity to be aware, but we have to be aware enough to begin that process. And that's part of what my intentions through these live YouTube videos is to support and empower you to begin that process of cultivating awareness in yourself to the next degree. My truth is, my highest truth is that every individual I know that I've spoken to has this incredible capacity to know themselves, to know that themselves in a place of intelligence and wisdom and truth. And when I'm talking to those people, they show up in that. And then as soon as those conversations are over, they kind of go back into that place of what they were, which might be in denial or ignoring and distracting themselves from this level of truth and presence. And this happens quite often with so many of my clients, is that we have these great conversations and they get a lot of clarity and insight. Oh my God, I see it. And part of coaching is the level of personal accountability for taking responsibility to say, oh, I see how I'm doing this. I see what I'm doing. And yes, I'm going to practice A, B, and C so that I can actually shift from the patterns that I've been in to a pattern that is more of what I want to be in, that pattern of growing contentment, growing serenity, growing peace, growing happiness. And people make those kinds of commitments and say, yes, this is what I'm going to practice. And then they kind of go into unconsciousness again, go asleep. We go back to sleep. We've heard this a lot. Rumi has a poem, don't go back to sleep. But that's what we do. I do it a lot myself. It's not like I'm beyond any of this. I'm just in a practice of cultivating the capacity to be more and more awake. And that awakeness is what we call enlightenment, that we're all striving for. And at the same time, we can't strive for it. We can only be here now in this and notice and observe and witness what's true right now for us and how do we be with that. What I want to offer to you too is that I have on my website, but also on YouTube, I have a boot camp. It's the Inward Bound Boot Camp for Self-Transformation. And it's a really great primer, if you will, to the steps of growing your capacity to self-transform or to go into these deeper levels of knowing yourself. And there's 20 videos. Each is about less than 10 minutes. There's 20 less than 10 minutes. That's about 200 minutes that will really, I think, if you're interested, could really make a difference for you. So the link is below. So take a look and see if there's something there for you. I also have books, as you know. There's some below too, I think, that you can check out. So let's see. This process is not about, you might be drinking, you might be eating, you might be gambling, you might be doing pornography or workaholic. You might be a nail biter. You might be a hair puller. You might be a masturbator. All of those ways are what is considered in last week's conversation, we talked about self-medication. Those are all ways that we use to lower our restlessness, our irritability, and our discontent. Bill W., who founded AA, said that the cause of addictions, all addictions, in his case it was alcoholism, is restless, irritable discontent. So whenever we're restless or irritable or discontent, and again, last week I talked about in the families that we grew up in, there is a level of anxiety or fear or discomfort, if you will. There's a spectrum, we're all on it, of dysfunctional families or levels of anxiety that's normal for us. And so we create patterns to deal with that normal level of anxiety or angst or of discomfort. And so as little children, we start to develop patterns and habits to calm ourselves. And it might be an emotional, we might cry, throw a tantrum because we feel powerless, so we can't get our way. We might we might be quiet or silent. We might get busy. We might start doing things to make people happy. There's all kinds of patterns we start to develop so that we can calm ourselves and feel a sense of power, empoweredness. I know for me, I said, okay, I'm anxious, and whatever it is as little kids that we can't understand what's going on. So we try to do something. We try to take control so that the situation, our symptoms diminish, our symptoms of angst and anxiousness start to diminish. So we do something. And again, we might hide, we might do something funny and get people to laugh at us. It shifts the energy. One way was either to be very quiet. I was a mumbler and people couldn't understand what I was saying because I was like so afraid of affecting people. And my other pattern was to do something to be helpful. What do people need? I would look for what do people need. And so I became a very good codependent person. If you needed something, I would think about what you needed before you even knew you needed it. And that's what I relied on when I decided to be somebody's wife. It was like, oh, they need me. So I became very needed. That was my pattern. And I didn't know who I was without that particular pattern. So our patterns and habits aren't just substances or behaviors and actions like buying stuff, going into debt, gambling, like I said, our gaming, social media. It's these patterns of how we relate to each other to calm down any restless, irritable discontent we might feel. When I realized that that was the case, when I heard that statement that all addictions are sourced in restless, irritable discontent, my question became, well, what's the source of restless, irritable discontent? And that was really, really important. And that took me to that deep recovery. Most people who are wanting to get sober, clean and sober, they just want to stop the behavior. I have to stop smoking. I have to stop drinking. I have to stop eating. I have to stop biting my nails. I have to stop picking at my scabs. I have to stop whatever it is that is, in a sense, self-medicating, but is not, that self-medication is in terms of calming from a sense of fear versus self-medicating to expand and heal. There are two ways of that self-medication. And so we have to look at that. And most people are wanting just to get clean and sober, just stop the behavior, stop the drinking, stop the codependency, stop living with somebody who's abusive and violent. Just stop, get out of it, get out of the situation. Children who are in abusive families, it's very difficult for them to come clean and come out and get help because it's a loyalty to the system. And so all of us, no matter how old we are, we have to get sober. And last week I talked about being a love addict and getting sober, like stop dating, stop being with men, in terms of that kind of relationship, but just a romantic relationship, and just get out of all of that so that I could get clean and sober. And in that process then began to explore at deeper and deeper levels, that's not even the right word, but be present to. That's more what happens is I got clean and stopped doing all that stuff. And anybody who has stopped their drug of choice, if you will, or the medication of choice, stuff starts to happen. Stuff starts to come up. Memories start to come up. Emotions start to come up. Physical symptoms start to come up. We start to feel things that we were working so hard to keep down, that restless, irritable discontent. What comes up is sadness, sad, bad, mad, basically. Sad, mad, bad. And what shows up is, in a sense, what's the source of our restless, irritable discontent? 99% of the time is a sense of powerlessness and hopelessness and helplessness. When we're little kids and our parents are upset or not around or whatever it is, we experience this place of hopelessness or powerlessness. I don't know if you saw the thumbnail on this particular YouTube live, but the guy is like, oh my God, it's like the sense of hopelessness is so part of who we are in our human experiences, but we're not allowed to know that in a sense. We don't have articulation for it, especially as like young children. And so it becomes a part of our patterning to cover up that hopelessness, that powerlessness, through anger or through helping or through disappearing or through social media, that powerlessness to potentially have friends, the powerlessness to get a job or feel fulfilled in any way, feel successful, the powerlessness to make a difference in the reality of other people's lives. There's that sense of powerlessness. And in essence, that's the source of most restless, irritable discontent, because we can't fix it. We can't heal it. We can't make it go away. And that's the big fat be with. So a lot of what you may be hearing today is in relation to that big fat be with. So again, the substances, patterns, activities, workaholism, all of that is a way for us to distract ourselves, avoid and ignore or even deny that restlessness inside of us, that irritability, and to certainly deny the source of that. What's the source of that restlessness, that irritability? Lately, I've been going through a process and having sensations and feelings and emotions that it's almost like a fog. I don't even know what it is, but I'm aware of it. And I feel this restless irritableness. And so I'm at choice. How am I going to be with that? I can eat. I love eating. But what I know is eating doesn't help. It calms it self-medicates and shuts it down for a few minutes. But as soon as I'm done eating, it comes back again. That's not helpful on the long term. I can be present to the sensations and do things that will help bring this out, so that it's no longer in this sort of fog, inarticulated fog, but can actually come through as an expression, in a sense, expression of more clarity in terms of perhaps what's the source of that powerlessness. Quite often, and any of you who have been in recovery, you might have noticed this, that when you release yourself from the patternings of your substance use or activities, when you stop using, in a sense, you become sober or clean, stuff starts to bubble up that it's like, where did that come from? Or old memories from when you were 7 or 12 or 27. These thoughts and emotions or feelings show up from what appears to be nowhere. But these emotions and sensations have been pressed down for so long. And so they come up and you go, why would I be feeling that? Or crying about things that just, it doesn't make sense. Or you're reacting far, far beyond the what's rational or logical in this point. Somebody broke a pencil and you just got rageful. And it's like, well, that's kind of out of sync with the situation. But it's only because that rage or that deep sadness or that deep expression came from some other experience of powerlessness and helplessness or whatever it is. And so when we begin to be aware of, what I'm experiencing now may not even be relevant to the situation now. It's just, it triggered it, and it stimulated this emotional response or these thoughts that are present. And so what in a sense makes this a deep recovery is that we become more conscious of, like, okay, we have to bring in our emotional intelligence, if you will. We have to grow ourselves to think about this in a bigger way. We have to, in a sense, adult ourselves so that we can say, wait, stop. You're experiencing something, and this is really, really important to experience and heal. And this isn't relevant to this situation. So this is where it comes in handy to have a life coach or a sponsor, like in the 12-step programs. This is where it's helpful to have a therapist or a spiritual guide or somebody that you can talk to that keeps you, as a thinking partner, keeps you aligned with, this is old stuff that's coming up. And again, whether you're using a substance or whatever, our whole process in this evolution as a spiritual being in human bodies is this process of revealing over and over this stuff that hasn't been processed, this stuff that hasn't been expressed, this stuff that hasn't been honored or acknowledged. And so the dog is barking. Gracie. Hey, Grace. Grace. She's over there. I'll put her outside in a second. So that's all a big deal. And for me, the healthier I am, the more that I can stay present to this feeling of discomfort without going to medicate with stuff that's not helpful. It might, again, drown my sorrows, if you will. Hang on one second. I'm gonna go out. Drown my sorrows, or I can begin to create an arsenal, if you will, of things to do and ways to be that will actually support and empower me, in a sense, self-medicate in a comfort way, comforting myself, but keeping myself in the presence of what I'm going through as best I can. So for instance, for me, I walk. It's a really, really important thing that I do. Call it a therapy if you want. It's a really important thing that I do that helps me stay present to myself and be in nature, which is really helpful to me, and be with my dog, which is really helpful to me, without diminishing the sensations and experience that I'm having. Every morning I get up and I make my coffee and I sit with, I do a clearing and a prayer, and then I sit with the book WHOLENESS, which is kind of like a Bible for me. And it always brings something to me in terms of a wisdom for me to attend to. And so it's a contemplative time for me to quite often relate to how I'm experiencing myself in my restless, irritable discontent, in my emotional self, in my symptoms, whatever those are, in relation to whatever oneness is saying to me. And it gives me a chance to really be present and focus on this. And I do that every morning, unless I have really early clients, which I sometimes do. But those are parts of what I do that are fulfilling and keep me present to the process. Some people, if you're in AA or NA and you're in the 12-step program, you're doing some sort of 12-step work. You might be talking to your sponsor every morning, or when you do. So there's things to do that can grow your capacity to be with this restless, irritable discontent. And I use those words primarily because that's what Bill W. said in the AA work. But what's really challenging of doing any kind of recovery work, and we're all doing recovery work, is to be with the discomfort. It's really challenging to be with the discomfort, especially when it's sort of ephemeral. It doesn't have a tangibility. I'm not feeling angry or sad, or it's just everything. And it's really hard to be with the discomfort of that. And we're taught, when we're discomfort, again, as little children, we train ourselves out of feeling that discomfort. We do something to try to get help. In a sense, we cry, when our diaper needs to be changed, when we're hungry, or whatever that is, we cry or we rage, and people come and you go, oh, that works. Anger works. I'm going to do more of that because that calms my system. I get support. And we learn people who have the anger problem, or, they go into a restaurant or wherever they are at work or whatever, and they're using anger all the time. It's because it's the only tool they know to, in a sense, self-medicate or comfort themselves. I once, I did a group with vice presidents in a particular organization in the Silicon Valley. And we did this really great exercise. And what showed up for almost every single vice president was that part of their patterning was to go to control freak. So they were controlling and in that kind of way, and it wasn't working, or it was working the way it was working, but it didn't allow for an expanded sense of how can you lead or how can you manage individuals differently than just as a control freak. All of us are control freaks. In a sense, we're all trying to get through life using specific patterns and habits and tools, if you will. In those, again, for me, it was taking care of people, finding what you needed before you knew you needed it, and taking care of it for you. And that makes me a really good coach because I'm so attuned to this larger, what is the need? What is the perspective that my intuitive nature in that way is huge. So I can be in this intuitive place as your thinking partner in a way that's very, very useful in this practice of being a transformational life coach, a business coach. Very useful. In my personal life, I'm learning how to not do that anymore because it's limiting my capacity to be my fullest expression, to be my fullest self, to be who I am outside that need to be in that pattern and to control. There's a woman named Tracy Goss. She wrote a book a long time ago called The Last Word in Power, I think it is. Last Word in Power. It's about executive reinvention. And though it's about executive reinvention, it's really such an amazing process of life coaching, in a sense. When we're in our patterns, when I'm in my pattern of taking care of your needs, I am not available and I don't have access to what's my needs. And in a sense that I'm in a robotic technical strategy and I'm in that direction, I have no capacities for anything else. And so if we want to grow our capacity to be our full self, hi Marge, I'm glad you're here. If we want to be in our full capacity, then we have to see our patterning and make room for other patterns. So instead of eating to get rid of the discomfort, I can do something else, or I can learn to be with the discomfort. The discomfort is there, and there's ways that I can be present to it without it overwhelming me. Sometimes it's just overwhelming, and I have to be with that. If I'm in an overwhelm, I'll go to bed, or I'll just sit on the couch and cry, or I'll be in a state of grief, or I'll be in a state of anger. In those states of being, I'm just allowing the expression of those sensations and those emotions to come through. If I can't do anything else, that's the best thing to do. And the client says, what if you're crying, or what if you're really sad? It's like, you have three options. First option is just be with it and let it be what it is, and it will work itself through. I think there's a statistic that says any emotion lasts no longer than 90 seconds. So if you really allow yourself to be present in anger, truly, it won't last very long, or sadness or whatever. Now, you may be going through waves of those things, and that's what you need to go through. And this is why it's helpful to have a thinking partner or a support person to help you go through those times, because it's part of the recovery of ourselves. It's part of the spiritual journey as well as this human journey. So number one is, if you're overwhelmed, just be with it. If you're not overwhelmed, but they're there, you can be present and know they're there and continue through your life. And you have those options. I think I said 3. So one was be in it totally, completely. The second is to be aware of it and let it be. The third is I'm just blanking right now on all of that. Marge, if you remember what they are, it'd be helpful. But it's a challenge to, and you know, I'm a working woman, so I have this process I'm in, as we all do, and I want to be aware and conscious of this process, be mindful, and I want to be present with my clients or my friends or my dog or my life, at my other elements of my life is at the same time. And so sometimes it means letting myself be in this process, this just state of being in whatever that is, this cloud, and continuing with my life, making sure I get fed, making sure I have plenty of water, making sure I rest. When I'm in these processes to a greater or lesser degree, sometimes I take naps. I need naps. Because sometimes through these processes, I don't know about you, you may have this experience too. Sometimes you might be awake through the night. It's a time for us to be processing. We don't choose to do it, but sometimes our psyche or whatever is saying, look, nobody's around. It's very quiet. Let's process. And it's like, okay. So some of my deepest, most extraordinary experiences with this healing process, the self-recovery process, has been in the middle of the night. And so I give myself that space to do that. I've tried to take melatonin, or I've tried to take things that would help me sleep, but it doesn't affect me. So if I need to take a nap during the day, I do that. So part of it is we're all in this process of growing ourselves. We're all in this process. Another way of thinking about this, but may be helpful. But you know, this earthly world is a lot of density, you know, and as we release the density, we get to higher and higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of ascension. It's like starting with, you know, first grade or elementary school, and it's like hard, and you know, you're learning who you are and all of that sort of harder stuff. But as you get more elevated up, it sometimes gets easier and easier. It gets harder and harder, but gets easier because you know what to do. You know how to study. You know how to be with yourself. You know how to grow yourself. You know how to do a lot of things that you don't know at the beginning. So there's a density. And every time we allow for the emotions or the states of being to be what they are, even though they're uncomfortable, by allowing them to be there, there's a purging or a detoxing that's happening. That's really required. And our capacities to allow that is really, really important. Quite often, we might get sick. There's things that happen in our life that wake us up. In the next month, I'm going to talk about spirituality specifically, but in our life, I think it's relevant here too. We're so normal. It's normal for us to be agitated, restless, irritable, discontent. It's normal to be in a state of frustration and disappointment and stress. It's what we consider to be normal. But at some point, something might happen. Circumstances that happen, for instance, the pandemic, or 9/11, or a health issue, or a work issue, or money issue, that wakes you up. You go, wait a second, what happened? And in that, we have to start taking responsibility for health and healing. And we hate that. I did a group called Aging Like a Guru with a number of people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I said something about, how are you being responsible in your life? And they all went, oh God, I hate that. It's because nobody wants to be responsible for our well-being. We don't want to take care of ourselves. We want somebody else to be accountable for our welfare. In a sense, some people work for a company and they're not happy. It's soulless work, but it's like, I will get paid to do that. Somebody will take care of me. If I sit here for 8 hours a day, in 20 years, I get a retirement check and I will be taken care of. My medical is taken care of. I will be taken care of. So I'm going to do this. I'm not happy. I'm stressed. It's not fulfilling, but somebody else is going to take care of me. And that's what I want. And at some point, we might get a 2x4 upside the head and go, wait, there's a wake-up call. And people who've gone through cancer is a huge wake-up call. There's lots of wake-up calls, but cancer seems to be one of them. Ooh, Marge has been saying stuff. Sorry, Marge. Simply accepting the sleeplessness rather than letting it make you angrier is such a relief. That's such a good thing to understand, that that can be processing time. Yeah. It is a processing time. And on a spiritual level, there's all kinds of things that are keeping you awake. Your divine guidance is keeping you awake so that you pay attention. You're not distracted. You can get up and distract yourself if you want to, but it's also a chance to stay quiet with yourself and really be present to yourself in ways that you can't be when the sun is up, the dog is barking, the husband wants food, and you're got 49 things to do before you go off to work or whatever that is. In the middle of the night, it's like, this is the time. And I am an expert at being awake through the night, not all the night, but a couple of hours. And that's where the work gets done. And it's important. It's really important, especially if you're not making time during the day. And very, very few of us are willing to make that time during the day for our recovery and reclaiming and really, truly being present to ourselves in that way. So what a lot of this deep recovery is about is being present to this restless, irritable discontent in a way that is not ignoring it, avoiding it, distracting from it. And what we're having to be with is the big fat be with, in a sense, is this is what is. We don't like being with what is. We want to change what is. We want to control what is. We either go to, here's what is, and we blame somebody else for our situation, our circumstances, the way that we are. We blame our mom and dad or our families or whoever it is that made us this way. So blaming is a good thing to do if you don't want to take personal responsibility and accountability for how your life is in this moment. But the big fat be with is, here it is. This is what is in this moment. And it sucks. My daughter would say, it sucks to be you, Mom. And it just sucks. It's uncomfortable. And taking personal responsibility, nobody likes those words. But it's what is in this moment. And I am at choice in this moment to choose how to be with myself. Now, myself is a human being. Myself is a child still that is unhealed and still carries the wounds of my family. And I can keep going, it's their fault and I'm a victim of that. Or I can say, okay, I can change this. I can actually heal myself. But I have to be present to that child part of me, the inner child, if you will. And so the more that I can be present to that, the greater degree of healing occurs. So that's kind of the process. I know Marge is, hi, Fred. Nice to see you. In my younger years, Marge says, I never understood why I go to bed and end up crying quietly. Thanks. Thanks, Marge, for saying that. It's like it's a safe place in our beds sometimes for most of us, that it's a safe place to have that time with ourselves, to really be with ourselves. And so that's the in a sense, the awakening is like, how can I be with myself? Where can I be with myself that's safe, and where I can trust myself with myself? The other element of in this consensus reality that we live in, we're taught not to trust ourselves, and it's called stinking thinking. The thinking that we do that's so pervasive in our patterns and habits, stinking thinking. And there's some slogan in AA that says you can't trust yourself right now. And it's true. It's true. There's so many ways that we cannot trust ourselves. But the process is to learn to trust ourselves. I am a pretty competent person. I have 3 master's degrees, a PhD. I've been living on the planet for almost 70 years. I'm a pretty competent person. I suspect you're a very competent person if you are listening to this, because you're able to turn on the YouTube, you're listening to me potentially, and that you have some competencies. But very few of us really trust that we're safe in the world with ourselves. We don't trust that we're safe with ourselves. We don't respect ourselves and say, I'm safe with myself. I can trust myself to make good decisions. I can honor myself for that. Very few people can say that. And it's one of the things that is so important in my coaching practice, is to support and empower people to learn and train themselves to trust themselves, that they are trustworthy. And in the patterns and habits they've developed came out of a need or desire to calm that restless, irritable discontent. And those patterns of that calming practice, that's what happened. And you were able to choose that. And your intelligence kept you alive and surviving. And now you're wise enough and you have the awareness to say, okay, I did that for a reason, but I don't need to do it anymore. I don't need to do that pattern anymore. I'm wise enough and strong enough and to change that because I say so. Not because for any other reason blah, blah, blah. Not for any other reason, but because what you want is something different. So when I got clear that, I talk about Big Don, who is this guy who had a 3rd grade education in Nova Scotia and worked at the pulp mill all his life, was alcoholic and then recovered and was in recovery for about 30 years when I met him. He had serenity. He had something I didn't have: serenity, peace. He could laugh and play and be wonderful and live his life. He had serenity. And I didn't. I was in angst and frustration and disappointment and in victiming and martyring and all these patterns. It's like, I want what Big Don has. And that was the beginning, is I want that serenity. And so I started looking at the patterns and the habits that didn't allow me that serenity. And that's, in a sense, as simple as it is to say, what is it that you want enough that you're willing to start shifting things when you see that you are not in a place of serenity, peace, tranquility, calm. Or Dalai Lama says, hey, the most important spiritual practice is kindness. Okay. So if you say, oh, I want to be more kind, it's like, okay, great. Notice when you're thinking or feeling unkind thoughts of yourself or other people. Just say, oh, there's one of those thoughts. I'm thinking an unkind thought. Stop. It's catching those patterns so that you can see them, first of all, and then go, oh, there it is again. Oh, there it is again. There it is again. And then you become more conscious of how often that pattern is in place. And you don't actually have to do anything more than just say stop. Because like getting sober with drinking or cigarettes or picking your face or whatever it is, that pattern is you get sober from unkind thoughts. You get sober from judging others or judging yourself. You get sober, you clean and sober. And constantly we're doing that. And as we stop that pattern of unkindness or negative thoughts, emotional stuff will arise and you'll feel uncomfortable. It's like, why, people say, I gave up alcohol. Why would I be feeling so emotional? It's because all of that the drugs and the patterns are there to oppress our emotional self. And we can't heal as long as we're oppressing ourselves and suppressing ourselves. So when we stop the pattern of unkindness, or the impulse to buy, the impulse to go on social media, the impulse to game or do pornography, when we stop those impulses, we're going to feel stuff, because the point of using is to diminish the feeling stuff. So we stop using whatever it is, and all of a sudden we start feeling this emotion, and it'll go, oh, I want my drug. I want my drug. I want my self-medication. I want to self-medicate. I do. I do. And I'm at choice to say, I'm not going to use that drug tonight. I'm not going to use that drug today. I'm not going to use, we're at choice to say, what can I use that's calming, but is not interfering with the release and the purging or the detoxing of that stuff that I haven't let up, that I haven't been willing to be with. And that's what we do. That's all there is to it. So it's like, what do you want more than this? It's like, I don't want to live in drama anymore. I don't want to live as a victim anymore. I don't want to live it as a pathetic loser, which is something I would call myself. Okay. Don't want to live that way. So how do I move that way, in the direction of fulfillment, serenity, playfulness, my more spontaneous, authentic self? The way that you do it, David Hawkins talks about this, is to stop doing what doesn't work. To stop doing what doesn't work. And negative thinking doesn't work. Blaming your wife for your situation doesn't work. Blaming your mother or your father or your boss doesn't work. That blaming thing, the judging of other people, doesn't work to bring serenity into your life. It makes you feel powerful, is empowering in a control freak kind of way, because you're controlling, but you're not being present to the truth that in these situations, this is who you are. You're powerless to be anything else in this moment. And at the same time, you lack nothing in this moment. So there's nothing to be afraid of, but we create fear all over the place. So the more that we can be present in this moment and be with the big fat be with, which is the discomfort of being you when it's uncomfortable to be you, that's the big be with. Now, and I'll tell you that some people are, in a sense, addicted to or in the habit of being depressed and unhappy because they have very little experience with being happy and fulfilled and being their authentic self. I think that's true for me. I had to be so in this controlled, strategizing way. And I think 90% of us on the planet are like that. So we don't even know who we are when we're in our authentic self. We don't even know. And so if we're given the opportunity to be in a state of that, it's uncomfortable. And people who come into a lot of money, they don't know how to do that. And so quite often that money goes away very quickly and they come back into their state of whatever level of poverty or whatever they were in, because it's uncomfortable to be in that state of expanded self. So the part of this process of recovering is the big fat be with, of being in a an environment or creating that environment where you feel fulfillment or playfulness or connection or engagement, joy. It's difficult. For a very long time, I had very few experiences of joy. And so it's like, I want more joy in my life. So guess what? I had to cultivate and train myself to notice, here I'm in a negative state. I don't need to be in negativity. There's nothing here that's necessary to stay in a state of negativity. Why would we choose that? We choose it because it's not even a choice. It's just a habit. And to start choosing something other than that negativity, that's a form of recovery. That's a form of getting sober or clean. And it's as simple as that. And again, I would like to have more experiences of joy and playfulness and prosperity. I want to know that experience. I want to give myself that. And so little by little, I'm letting go of stuff. I'm letting go of stuff in terms of beliefs, emotions. I'm allowing this discomfort to be here because everything that's in the oneness, it says your highest, sorry, I'm not going to get this right. Basically, your highest capacity for fulfillment is always forthcoming. So the degree of prosperity that I want, I can't get there yet because I still got stuff I'm dealing with. I still got oppressed stuff that's in here that as I let it out, it gives me higher and higher capacities for being with prosperity and joy and fun and playfulness. That's what I want for everybody, is to go, oh, I'm being negative right now. Or I'm holding this anger, or I'm holding on to, I won't be forgiven. I'm holding on to being unforgiving of myself and other people. And we begin to see these patterns and we go, oh, I'm doing that to myself. I'm waking up in the morning and going, oh, you're going to have a rotten day, or whatever that is. It goes, hey, stop. That's not true. I don't know what kind of day I'm going to have, and I don't want to have that kind of day. And we become more conscious of our choices to have the day we want versus letting ourselves do that patterning thing that gets in the way of having the day that we regretted over and over and over again. So let's see if there was anything else I wanted to say here. I wrote this. Let's see if it's helpful. Spirituality, what we're doing is cultivating faith, that if we let go of the patterns that we're used to, the patterns that are so we're so unconscious that these patterns exist. The more that we become conscious of it, we have to live in faith that this is just a thought, that it's just an idea that I've been living in. Worry was a really big thing that I did all the time. And it's like, what's the point of worrying? It's just something I made up to do to make me feel like I'm in control of the future. It's not. It's not. Our worrying doesn't control the future. And it can prepare us to a degree, but we had a major rain here, and no matter how much people worried, their house either got flooded or it got wiped away or the roads disappeared or whatever it was. And all the worrying and preparing didn't make a difference. So it doesn't mean that we can't be conscious and go, well, is there something I can do? But the constant worrying as a pattern and a habit creates a lot of negativity. It's not, I'm learning to let go of that. And as I do that, I worry less. It's like as I let go of it, I worry less, and I'm more in control and more conscious of how I be in the world. So I'm not any less safe because I don't worry. It's just something that I don't have to do anymore. So when we can be conscious of those patterns and go, I'm going to try and see what happens if I give up worrying, or stop that worry thought, stop that worry thought, stop that worry thought, see what shows up. And it's not like major event And this is the same when you're recovering from or trying to get sober with alcohol or drugs or food. It's like, oh, I'm going to have to give this up forever, or a sex addict or love addict, all of these things, workaholics, people who work that conscious, compulsive. It's like, I'm going to have to give this up forever. And it's too big and too overwhelming. If we take one step at a time, these are the slogans of AA or any 12-step program, one day at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time, one thought at a time. There's a negative thought. Ooh, stop. I was really good at being a judging person. Judging gave me a sense of righteousness. I love being righteous. So I noticed these judging thoughts as, part of my negative patterning. It's like, stop. I don't judge I judge a whole lot less. I can't say I stopped judging completely. But I'm aware of those patterns that are not allowing me to be in this state of serenity or tranquility or peace or playfulness, or just be present in the moment, because I'm not looking for all that stuff that I would worry about or judge or feel guilty about, all of those kinds of things. And it's like, so the idea here is, if you like the state of being in stress and disappointment and irritability and frustration and loneliness and anger and whatever else it is that you're in, if you're enjoying that, keep doing it. I'm not going to tell you to stop doing it. If it works for you, keep doing it. If you want serenity and peace and playfulness and clarity and openness and whatever else words, and anytime I talk with a person that wants coaching, transformational coaching, they're not wanting that. What would you like from coaching? I want to be more irritable and pissed off and upset. And I want to keep telling the world how terrible they're doing it. I want to be the boss. It's like, okay, great. Let's keep doing that. But that's not what people come in. Most people, 99% of the people on the planet, they want to be helpful. They want to serve in a positive way to make the world a better place. But they can't get out of their own way. Most of us can't. And so that's the value of having a transformational life coach or a life coach or a business coach or a therapist or a spiritual guide, somebody that can be a thinking partner for you so that you can get out of your own way. And so that's pretty much it. So again, the idea is that you're just taking this one thought at a time. And again, people will go, oh my God, it's going to take me a lifetime. Yeah, that's what we're here for. We're here to go through this human experience, this process of learning and growing by noticing our thinking process and see how it's influencing what we're creating in the world so that we can change that. We're cultivating character, if you will. We're looking at what's the wisdom here that I have, the intelligence. I can't tell you. I would love you guys to sit with me as I'm sitting with my client so you could see how extraordinary every individual is when they are given the opportunity to freely have a thinking partner, freely explore who they truly are. They're phenomenal. Every single person I've ever spoken with is phenomenal. And that's true for you too. And I know you want to have a great life and you want to contribute to the world in a really positive way. And you're probably in your way just as much as I am in my way. And so we're all doing this together. Every single person, all 8 billion of us on the planet, we're all doing this together. And the more conscious we can be about that process, and the more conscious we can be about our choices to say, I want more positivity. And so I'm going to look at and notice the negative thoughts. That's just the beginning. And that's all there is to it. So I think that's pretty much it for me. Any questions or thoughts before we finish? If you're watching this as a recording, please, thank you for the thumbs up. I really appreciate that. And if you're watching this and you have thoughts about your own processes in this work of deep recovery, I would love you to leave them down in the comment section below, and that could be a really high contribution to the well-being of everyone who's watching this. All right, thanks very much. David, you're here. I'm so glad to see you. And I love this. A good friend becomes as a mirror. I think that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here, David and Fred and Marge and whoever else is here. And I will see you next week again to talk a little bit more about recovery. We're going to talk about the Serenity Prayer, what's in it, and some of the 12-step stuff. And some people go yuck about that. But if you're one of those people that say yuck about the 12-step program and Serenity Prayer, then you probably want to watch this, because it's good stuff. It's good stuff. All right. Thanks again, you guys, for being here. Bye for now.